And with that,
we'd like to introduce Greg.
So Greg Veith is Director of SRE at Azure. And
thank you. All right, let's do a little AV. By the way, AV guys, I turned off that mic there. Excellent. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very thrilled to be here today, have the opportunity to talk to you guys about the journey that we've embarked upon within Azure to build SRE. Azure is Microsoft Enterprise Cloud Services, as you guys all know. I'm going to share some stories, some results, and learnings that we've had through the last year since I started on the team, and hope that these will be found useful for you on a similar journey. First thing is that organizations are alive, and they act like organisms. They exhibit characteristics of all of us. They live, they grow, evolve, and react to stimuli. They can be healthy and sick. They require nutrients, and they sunset. For a service to be successful, customers expect it to be alive, and that means available and reliable. The higher functioning services and the level of performance of an organization reflect the level of reliability in the service. As services and organizations grow, they hit inflection points that require new ways to approach operations. The moral of the story is what got you here won't get you there, and it requires growth and adapting to the environment. Change isn't only possible, it's imminent, so the key is how to drive it. So as we grow in complexity. So this is a metaphor for the growth of a service, from bacteria to the most complicated organ in the known universe, which is the human brain. It shows the characteristics of growth and evolution happen through constant and adapting to environmental conditions. At Microsoft, we're growing and adapting. My name's Greg Veith, and I'm the Director of Azure SRE. I've been at Microsoft now for about 20 years. That's right, 20 years. I've worked in the Bing search and ads for about half of my career, and for the last year, I've been in the Azure team. We're evolving our approach to operations within Azure. We've hit scale points that have really required us to rethink how it is that we're operating our systems. We're working to formalize the principles of SRE and really understand what SRE is in the context of our company and in the context of the community. We don't get to start SRE in the goal state that many teams are in right now and have earned. We have to cold start SRE, and it's a significant challenge. So let me provide you a little bit of context on Azure and what it is and the scale that we're operating at. So first here, this is Azure service offerings, and it's a bit of an eye chart, and it's on purpose. There's 58 service offerings within Azure. All of these can be leveraged as individual standalone services. All of these have a development team behind them, and all of them have distinct customers that are using this in multiple topologies. So let me give you a little bit of the size and scale through some numbers here. I won't talk through the numbers, you can see that, but we're very much operating at mega scale now. We've pulled together a bunch of the core infrastructure components from multiple parts of the company, and we now have one core infrastructure, Azure. There's over 200 services at the company. I don't know if everybody realizes that. It's not just a service team at Microsoft. These include Bing, MSN, Office 365, Xbox, Skype, OneDrive, and so forth. There's a staggering number of customers that are running on Azure today. First-party services at Microsoft all run on Azure. When Xbox has a problem, you guys probably heard of the Snoop Dogg incident, we had an Azure problem. And so when we get a sniffle, the rest of our customers really get the flu or can collapse and fall over. The loss of even a single virtual machine has had the impact on a business and can actually take out a single business. And so we take it very seriously. The availability and reliability of just single nodes even is critically important to us. So it's incumbent upon all of us who hold customers' data and workflows in trust to deliver on the promise of the reliability. So Azure is huge and it's growing. It's very complex, and operating at services at this scale can be very complex as well. So let me show you some of the evidence of transformation that's been required for us to be able to get started with SRE. Our company is fundamentally changing. So imagine if I showed you all this slide about 3 or 4 years ago. I know that you would call me crazy. Look at all this. Linux, open source, Git within Visual Studio. Android has Office. In fact, we worked on Office first for Android on the mobile devices before we did our Windows Phone. And so what this really shows is that Microsoft is working to go where the customers are. We're not expecting customers to come to us. We're thinking of ourselves not as the incumbent, but as a challenger. And it changes our perspective on how we operate and what we do. So our CEO, Satya Nadella, has really been pressing this since he started as CEO a few years ago. Prior to that, he was the vice president on Bing, and I had the opportunity to work for him there. And I really saw that transformation begin in Bing, and now it's transferred to the entire company. So this is, of course, an enormous shift for a company that's 41 years old. And it's non-trivial at the scale that we operate at Microsoft, but it's happening. And it's happening within my group, which is Azure. I work on the core Azure team, which is storage, compute, network, and a few other services. So how do you start a transformation like this? Well, you have to start with an open mind and a growth mindset, as well as a learning culture. I want to tell you guys a couple stories about some production incidents that we had and how we learned from them. So in 2009, I was on the Bing platform team, and I was the happy manager of a very junior engineer who pushed an innocuous config change into a test cluster that took down Bing in about 5 minutes. It was the most effective disaster test that we could have done. It took us about 30 minutes to get back and recovered, and we found it was a really bad day for our customers. It was a terrible day for our brand. We were only 6 months old at the time. And the learnings that we had from this were priceless, though. So we looked at that as an opportunity to really learn. We took it very seriously. We were very much a production-focused team. And we took the perspective of production, and the features we've already shipped are the most important features. The ones we're about to ship are interesting, and the ones customers are using are critical. So that this happened was really no one's fault. It was actually categorized initially as a human error, and I take issue with the fact that there's even a categorization of human error. What I believe is that there's really insufficiently designed control systems, and you shouldn't have human error. And so what we were able to do from that is work on the postmortem. I worked on the postmortem myself for a couple days with several people on the team, and we identified literally tens of areas of repair, including our config design, our test procedures, our infrastructure itself, the deployment process and policies, our parser. The parser was actually what blew up as a core root cause of the issue. It was literally someone hit a shift key when a shift key wasn't needed on a control character. And so what we did from that is really learn and took the learnings, and we adapted and turned it into fundamental changes in the tech, how we test, how we release. It took several months actually for us to fix all of the core issues that went through the entire stack. So we obviously mitigated and put the duct tape that was required on the core issue, but then worked and had a lot of deep work to get the system back up and very robust so that this never happened again. Now in November 2014, Azure suffered from a large production incident as well, and it significantly impacted both Microsoft properties as well as third parties. I wasn't working on the team at the time, but since I started last May, I've done a lot of research into this particular incident, and the amount of rigor that was put into this postmortem is staggering, and the learnings from that are enormous and amazing. So the repairs identified had to do with recovery mechanisms and procedures, again, testing, configuration and configuration policy and management, deployment, our incident response, monitoring, alerting, and so forth. I could go on. This also was the incident that was the catalytic moment for my executive chain to decide that they want to invest in SRE as the approach to operations going forward. So the teams took these outages extremely seriously and both had critical learning experiences that changed how we execute. We don't take pride in having incidents, but we do take pride in the learning from incidents. Oh boy, we're having an incident now. So let's call in, do we have any on call? Anybody here do on call? Come on, help us out. There we go. This guy's hired. So let's take a look at some of the, oh boy. This was all planned, by the way. Perfect timing, thank you. All right, let's talk about scaling up operational models. So here we see the transformation of a mining operations from a guy with a pickaxe to a mechanized tool, to a fairly large operation in a quarry with large equipment, to the largest earth-moving system in the world. And so each of these requires different skills, different operators, different technology, different approaches. In the first case, really what you need is the operations team providing the capability for a sharp pickaxe, a headlamp, a helmet, and some gloves for the gentleman here smacking at the rocks. If you come all the way to the earth mover side, if you think about it, the technology, the skills, the specialization of tools and capabilities are critical to run something at that scale constantly and without error. So what this is getting at is that operations is truly a gnarly problem space. It's an engineering problem. Fundamentally, it's not a people problem. When you think about it, services spend the vast majority of their life in production. And so the amount of work to keep them available and reliable is significant, and it's a constant race to deliver on that promise to customers. There's a lot of models employed today for operations, and there's no problems with any of them. All of them are perfectly acceptable approaches, and they've built billion-dollar businesses. We find SRE to be the model that is the most appropriate for the large scale. We're inspired by the industry and what we've seen from others in the industry and what they've done. And we see it as the most effective way for us to move forward at the scale that we're operating at. I really respect what the brand is for SRE, and one of the things that I've learned after going to LISA and SREcon, meeting folks from all over the industry, is really the recognition that this is a different role. It's a different approach. It's an incentive structure. It's a different system. It's not just a label. It's not something that you call yourself. It's something that you really have to earn. And so for me and my team, it's something that's really important for us to exhibit the capabilities before we call ourselves that. Now, I do call my team the SRE team, and that's with intent of direction. We're working on that. We've hired many people from industry, and I do have people that I would call legit SREs on the team right now. So we're starting SRE in Azure. We could really use some help. Oh, and we got Clippy. So Clippy's going to give me a hand here. Luckily, we have digital assistants from the last millennium. And yes, I would love your help, Clippy. So do you have an SR Easy button for me? So really this is not a trivial problem, right? Starting this is truly a cultural engineering problem. It's not just a technology problem, as all of you know. So when I came to the team, one of the first things that people said to me is, hey, awesome, we're so happy to have you on the team. Here's the pager. When do you guys go on call? Thank you so much. Finally, I don't have to go on call so much. There was a really great framing memo that was written that was actually the document that my executive chain had built to say we're investing in SRE, we're investing in a new operational model. There was great executive support. So that's a key starting point. I wouldn't have started this team without the executive support from my boss and from his. And then there was reality when we hit the ground. And so the Friday of my first week, I'm 5 days into the job. We have the senior leadership team getting together of all the senior engineers in the division. And my boss says, hey, why don't you go ahead and stand up, Greg, and you have a chance for 5 minutes to go ahead and say hey and say whatever you want. After having talked to so many people in the first couple of days and realizing how many people thought we were just, next version of operations, I knew I had to take a stand and say something provocative to force conversation and to assert where we were. And what I said is, I'm not here to build operations V2. This is not an incremental change. This is a fundamental change. It's going to be a change in how we work, how we execute, how the system has to be designed, and it requires everybody. And I got to say, when I looked out in the crowd, I really saw a bunch of question marks floating over people's head, kind of cockeyed and looking at me weird. And I realized that wasn't something that landed well with the crowd. People were looking for a silver bullet and an easy button. It's not there. So it quickly became clear to me subsequently, and from that meeting, there was a globally naive understanding of what SRE is, the implications of implementing it. And so really had to work hard to understand the context of the system, where people were coming from, how they were thinking about it, and really disambiguating it for the entire division to make sure that we were holding to the principles of SRE while also being realistic about the place we were in our business. So one of the things that I had learned is the assumptions that I had made. So having come from Bing and search and ads, we were a fairly mature service team. We really started in the cloud as Bing. And we were able to start as a small team, singular of purpose, coming from a single culture, a single infrastructure, and so forth. And the tricks that I had and that I was able to leverage from Bing were not applicable to the culture and the systems in Azure. And so I assumed that there was a broad buy-in. I didn't find the broad buy-in. I assumed that there were areas of responsibility that were outlined in this document that were going to be clearly put on the team. That was not true. I assumed that people understood the reason why we were starting SRE. And it wasn't super clear as you talk to engineers on the ground. So what I found early on was I saw enough symptoms of the problems to form a pretty quick opinion about what was needed for reliability and reliability improvements. And I got to say that the empathy I had was for our customers and not for the engineering teams. I was very vectored towards what it is that we need to deliver to the customers, and that was a fail in that I didn't really seek enough understanding of where teams were to understand how to navigate the system and help to drive the culture forward. So in some cases I was politely ignored. In some cases there was active resistance. There was brick walls, pokey things in the night when sharp objects that we ran into. And then there were some really good bright spots and some stuff that we found was really successful. So starting SRE, at least how I started it, has been extremely disruptive to the status quo. Change is really hard, and change at scale is even harder. So after realizing the lack of clarity within the system, I realized that we really had to catch my breath, pause, and figure out a strategy and work with my LT to build something together. So let's say heading north is our metaphorical goal. So where is north? It's freaking everywhere. So ask anybody on the team where it was. It's over there, it's over there. So it wasn't super clear to the team what it was that we were trying to do, both the organization that I inherited as well as the team around me. So we were pulled in many directions. When I started the team, my manager asked me to do three things. Build SRE, build it within Azure first, and then work to get it across Microsoft. Don't mess up operations. He said it with a different word instead of mess up. And improve optics into the system. I'd like to understand operationally better where we're at with the system health. And so what I did is spend a lot of energy actually working to build the future. What is theoretical SRE? What is an end state, a goal state that we're approaching? Had big aspirations and really ended up finding myself moving too fast on that new part and not really paying enough attention to what is happening. And so I had a lot of ambition and wanted to move very quickly. What happened was I really didn't have the engineering muscle on the team. What I'd inherited is a couple hundred folks that were in IT operations, network operations, and service engineering at Microsoft. And those teams weren't set up to be on an offense team. When I say offense, obviating toil, avoiding toil. They were receiving toil, and it was a classic operations model. The other thing for SRE is, in Azure, it was unclear where the work was, because what we found was it was everywhere, and everyone was doing it. Meaning that each team had different elements of what you would call, or in the SRE kind of swim lanes or areas of focus. So we couldn't hire people until we had clarity of work, and we couldn't get work going until we hired people, and so we had a bit of a conundrum. And so what I did was really think about my recruiting strategy and how important it was to hire the right folks. And the right folks in this case were pioneers, I call them. They're the intrepid few who could go out and really work to disambiguate and help us to get the right models in place, the right strategies in place, and recruit the right people subsequently to go and execute. I think of myself as a startup in a huge organization. We have to act as entrepreneurs. My exec chain is the VC, and I have to come back and provide some return on investment. And so as I was speaking, and you could probably imagine, my vRun strategy was do everything. Well, that's a huge amount of energy, and that wasn't the right approach. And so we really had to go back and figure out what we needed to do, pause, and be decisive, pick a direction so that we can get the key talent that was already in place and existing, get enough buy-in, and then learn by doing. So the critical move for us here was to build the outcomes and measures. I like to call them the symptoms of success. So here's our 3 symptoms of success. For the folks in this audience, this is probably obvious, and it's definitely not revolutionary, but it is clarifying, and it's helped my team and the rest of the organization understand where we're coming from and what it is that I'm goaling our teams on. I like to think about metrics that I want people to game, meaning that I want you to try to optimize these metrics. Now, when you build a really good set of metrics, I call them tension metrics, because if you game any single one of these metrics, you throw the rest of the system out of whack. For instance, availability and reliability meeting SLO. Well, I can meet that, but the pattern that's often met by doing that is to go slow. Well, that's in contention with the third one, which is increasing velocity. Eliminating human touches to production. Again, one of the ways you can eliminate human touches to production is go slow or don't churn. Well, that again is in contention with 3. And then increasing the velocity of deployment and just doing that and going as fast as you can obviously puts the first 2 in jeopardy. And so this really builds an interesting tension set that allows us to game each of the metrics, but keeping it in balance. And I found that that's really empowering for the team, A, to understand where north is. The other thing is it's really interesting to see how we optimize for each of these things, because we do focus on different areas, but you just can't pull them out of balance or the system gets screwed up. So we've got some good objectives, we've got reasonable symptoms of success, and now we really needed a strategy. And so we came up with 3 strategic pillars. The first is starting SRE at Microsoft. The next one is proving the model. How do we get in and start doing SRE or SRE-like activities in a system that's not yet SRE-able? That's a new word, I think. And accelerating and improve common operational themes that span the entire organization. So reinventing the wheel is not a goal for me with SRE. There's prior art, wisdom of the crowd, expertise that I've been able to hire, expertise that we have from folks that I've worked with at Microsoft as well as myself. And we want to make sure that we adapt what this art is and what this role is within our culture. It's just not a cargo cult. We're not copying things. We're taking the core principles that we've learned from other organizations and other individuals to pull into our culture. And really the magic is going to be in how we get there, not what it looks like. So goal state is good and we have an approximate direction, but how we get there is going to be the real magic. And so the next part of this SRE at Microsoft thing is that we needed to hire those pioneers. Enormous amount of ambiguity in the system. We need people who've starred in this movie, who've already seen this, who are from the future, or have seen or smelled the future. It's really important for that key talent, and it's something I'm happy that I did versus hiring just a bunch of engineers and programmers and sysops folks that could come in and do stuff, because we had to lay the groundwork and the foundation for us to actually go out and deliver value. So I hired key talent, folks from Google, Amazon, EMC, Yahoo, VMware, other folks from Microsoft who've been in other service teams, as well as subject matter experts within Azure. What I found with that too is that diversity of context, background, understanding, skill sets has really been important for SRE. We need to not get into a groupthink situation. We need to be challenging ourselves. We need to make sure that we have all kinds of diverse opinions and solutions and capabilities on the team. And so we're really a team that is, I believe, one that is constantly challenging ourselves. We're constantly looking at different ways to approach it. We're not getting caught into a narrow band thinking. And then the third thing about this that I think was a success was co-creation. And what that means is that I pulled together a set of operational leaders from across Microsoft, as well as folks from HR and recruiting, to get together to build a cross Microsoft working group to help define what this role is. What are the responsibilities? What is our end state vision? How do we think about the capabilities of the role? How do we maintain a bar together? We do not have an executive chain for SRE, like at Google, where there's an executive and then it's a peer to the product teams. We have multiple product teams. Excuse me. And so it was really important for us to build this together. It's not just, hey, we're going to build this out of Azure and the rest of Microsoft deal with it. It's, hey, everybody from Microsoft, we're going to build this together and let's start really holding the bar and making sure that we understand what we're doing. And so as we became more educated, we identified 3 cohorts within Azure for our SRE engagement types. And I want to show you a little bit about that. So we found 3. First is services at planetary scale. These are storage, compute, network, the very big boys. The next one are the newer services facing very rapid growth, such as IoT, there's Power BI, there's a bunch of other ones, HD Insights, that are growing like crazy. And then there's the greenfield. These are the ones that, another production incident. Anybody? It's always fun going first. All right, let me keep going. So with the established services, they're very mature. And if you notice, when you work with these teams, you'll find that scale at which they're operating requires them to have SRE-like functions within the team. They're already working on deployment. They're already working on monitoring, alarms, all of the things that you would think are in the wheelhouse of SRE. And so that's something to really be careful about jumping into and saying, hey, assertion, we work on these things. Well, actually, me, don't work on those things. You work on those things. And so we have to really figure out how to leverage the talent and the skills of the folks that are on that team. We work to staff augmentation in these models to help solve specific problems with those teams. New services, we can rapidly increase their velocity and capability. They're not a staff to deal with doing everything. And so there's a really great opportunity there, and we're spending a lot of time and focus on some of these. So one of the funniest comments I had when I was working with one of the partner teams that we got going on an SRE pilot was, really, you guys want to help me write better code faster? You're going to go on call. You're going to be part of the team. What's the catch? And so the thing is, there isn't a catch. We're there. What we're getting out of it is the learning, understanding, and the context of the system, and we're also able to apply SRE principles. So we have strategies, outcomes, measures, and mental models put together, the role definitions in place. Now how do we start? And this is where we came up with the production readiness document. It's been a really critical instrument for us to actually get going. So you can't cook operability into a finished system. Much the same as flying a jet, you don't ask the question, hey, are the hydraulics installed right before you take off? So we needed a cogent method for people to get started with SRE projects and make sure that we understood what it is to be production ready. And so there's a saying that I got from one of the gents on my team, Kasky. SRE is like your doctor or your lawyer. The more that you share with us, the better we can help you. And so the production readiness document is exactly that. It's a document that we wrote early last fall that's an instrument to begin pilots, these SRE pilot teams. It's a set of principles, objectives, design patterns, and specific capabilities that have been proven in other contexts to improve reliability of services. We sit with feature teams in a guided discussion and run through each topic in the production readiness document. It requires moderation, and it requires a large amount of time actually to do it well. Jake Welch, who's on my team, will be talking about one way that we apply the production readiness discussions, and we call it service roasts. He has I think, a talk later today. So after discussions with the teams, what we do is put together what we call the SRA, the opportunities document. It's the assessment document. And so we work through each of these areas from build, deployment, production playbooks, recovery testing, performance testing, capacity management, and we build up the opportunities that we've identified based on the experience that we have and what we talked with the teams about. From that, it turns into a backlog that we send to be prioritized with the product owners. And so they've worked through these lists of things and figure out what are the most pertinent areas for them to work on, the ones that are causing the most pain. And then my team applies resources to help where we can add value quickly, even without the capability or subject matter expertise, I should say, before we have the deep context of the technology. So I got to say the ROI is super unclear at the outset. It's something that is pretty high risk for a team to take the time to actually work on. And so we really need enlightened and willing leaders to work with us to get this off the ground. And so I'm going to talk to you about a couple of pilot teams and how we use the production readiness document to kick off one of them. So again, reminder, proving the model, piloting teams, hypothesis in place, attempting to disprove it, working with the teams. So the first team we worked with is IoT. So IoT is the Internet of Things. I'm showing you here a very small topology that we have running in Azure with Thing 1 and Thing 2. We do see much larger topologies in place too. But this has really been an excellent place for us to start SRE because it's a nascent industry. It's growing like crazy. This particular product's already in production and running at very large scale today. And we found that we have really intrepid and enlightened leaders that are willing to work with us. They really believe in the theory and the capability of what we say SRE can be, and they want to work with us. So we ran through the production readiness with them, delivered the opportunities doc, and we've worked now, my team has delivered on engineering solutions for build. We've reduced build times and the source layout for their team, item potency of the builds and the deployment. We've worked on instrumentation, built near real-time high-fidelity metrics for them to measure their SLO and also for investigation of life site and production incidents. And we're also working on some refactoring right now to decouple some services to increase the agility for them on their team. My team is also really senior. And so I'm doing that on purpose. Again, this ambiguity that we have requires people that can go in and really disambiguate and understand what's going on. It's a small team right now. We have about 6 or 7 people, and I'm just getting used to this now. It's a small team right now, and we're doing that very intentionally with each team. I'm not going to load up teams with a bunch of people and just come in and swarm in. We do want to build more demand than there is supply in SRE. I'm not looking to build an enormous empire. At the same time, I think that starting a team small makes a heck of a lot more sense, high bandwidth communication. So what we saw here was a really common theme that we've run into with everything in SRE so far is that we need fungibility, the capability to rapidly onboard to any team and get very effective very quickly. And so we have a principle which is we're going to leave it better than we found it. And so in this particular case, as we were bootstrapping effectively as new hires on the team, build, test, and list, deploy, we found all the gaps in the documentation and we made it better. We filled it in so that the next set of people could come in and be effective. One of the TPMs on my team actually wrote automation to get a development environment up and running within 5 minutes. And so we want to be able to write code and debug and be part of this code base as fast as possible. And so it's been an extremely good learning process for us. We don't have all the answers by any means, and we're figuring out what works and what doesn't. So we approached IoT differently than we did storage. Storage, as you guys know, is an enormous scale, massive hockey stick growth system. There's extremely high demand for storage. Storage underpins basically the rest of our company and an enormous amount of other third-party customers. And it's required to provide the capacity and manage the capacity for that internationally and across regions and so forth for all these other services. So we didn't start this team in SRE production readiness assessment. What we did was, prior to my starting, I had a set of folks that were actually working on this, and they had a semi-automated process to balance capacity, what we call demand shaping. And so it was semi-automated and mostly manual, and there was a lot of toil involved, and so we saw an opportunity for us to build a production service. And so what we did is we built the demand shaping service, which is now a fully automated service that is balancing the capacity across multiple regions, making sure that we can build out faster and make the capacity useful more quickly. We stay in front of CPU pressure or actual allocation pressure so that we avoid availability and reliability incidents. So the takeaway from this is that while this was a staff augmentation approach, it was extremely valuable for us to learn about the stack and how to do SRE-like activities. It built credibility for my team. We're really fully formed engineers. We're not, people that are just going to go over here and manage stuff that you throw over the wall. It helped learn more of the system. Storage being the underpinning of the system, it required us to traverse more of the system, and so it really was helpful in learning the services. And then also it was a practice what we preach, in that we eliminated toil. We delivered a service at small scale that's highly operable. We're on call. And so it was really good practice for us to get going with that. And now we're building more SRE teams and we'll leverage that learning. So the next pillar in our strategy is about accelerating and improving blank screens. So there's common horizontal operational needs for any service. And we have several areas that A, I inherited when I came, and that B, we think are the right things to do to scale across a broad set of services, and not just specific SRE teams. So let me give you guys a couple mental models we found useful in explaining what we do. The first one's called the production virtuous cycle. Again, this is probably a no-brainer for this crowd, common sense, but I find that common sense isn't necessarily common. And so this was a really useful tool for us to explain to people how we think about what we do. SRE sitting in the middle of this does not mean that we own it. What it means is we obsess about it. This is the thing that we want. We want this cycle to go as fast as possible and no faster until the quality is in place, and then continue pressing on the velocity of this thing. I find the cycle to be universal in every service team that I've worked on. The faster that you can do this, the faster you can ship, the less work in progress, less inventory on the shelf, not in customer's hand, smaller batch sizes, easier to debug. There's just brilliance and goodness. And again, you folks here have been in the DevOps community for a long time. And this is, again, kind of, I think, a duh moment. But it's something that's really important, and it's helped a lot of the teams that we've worked with to figure out what it is that we do. So let me talk to you about another mental model here, or areas of focus. It was also something that was really helpful for teams. Again, probably super obvious swim lanes for this crowd, but something that I found was really centering. It helped us to get our partner teams understanding what we're focused on and why. And the other thing from a learning perspective is we don't have to own all of this. We just obsess about all of this. And so coming into a brand new team, you're not going to come in and pull the hundreds and hundreds of people from N teams together who are all working on similar stuff and just reorganize that. That's not going to be an effective method. And so what we're doing is working to find the folks that are everywhere in the organization working on this, attach to them quickly, and work with them to accelerate these things. My goal is to get coordinated execution on this so that we can move from silos to general horizontal solutions that have more of a global optima instead of the local optima. So I'm not going to go through each one of these things. You guys can read that. And these are just right in the wheelhouse of everybody who's doing DevOps and SRE, I believe. But that first swim lane, metrics and monitoring, is there for a reason. And it's because this is the foundation of all reliability. So metrics and monitoring. No one needs more data more quickly than SRE. I have a couple of sayings that I've picked up over the years that I really love with this. If you don't measure it, it doesn't matter. And what that means, when you're not measuring something, you've made a tacit decision to not try to optimize it. So measure what matters. And if you don't, you might accidentally improve that. You'd rather intentionally improve that, so measuring it is critical. And then sunlight's the best disinfectant, meaning that the capability for you to shine lights deep into the system is going to help disinfect the system. The bugs, the warts, the areas in the system that need help will be illuminated. And so I know I'm singing to the choir here, but this is critical for epic incident response, the capability for us to quickly identify issues during an incident. So the first move that I made on my team, actually, when I started, before I knew anything, was to build the operational intelligence team. And this is a team of subject matter experts. I worked with several of them from Bing and recruited them. They work on data pipelines, instrumentation, SLO, data hygiene and quality, and building metrics and making sure that the metrics are world-class. I'm leveraging this team as mercenaries right now. They're kind of a horizontal team. And for instance, I've attached 3 of these guys into the IoT SRE team. And what they're doing is basically bolstering that capability there because, again, what I don't want to do is have local optima in my SRE teams. I want to be able to share the capabilities that we build. And so this has really been successful and it's really been helpful. Again, that team is learning more code bases in more of the areas in the product. And it's something that I think is a horizontally global optima-based solution, SRE being force multipliers. So this, again, bolstered the need for an inner source model. I talked about ramping up, but inner source is another thing that we need to build. And so inner source is our capability to do open source kind of capabilities within the system. I need to be able to contribute to any code base very quickly. And so when we run into any sort of friction or gaps in capabilities for us to do that, we're again documenting it, but we're now running that as a project and working with a couple of teams to actually figure out how to formalize what this looks like. And so the next one that we work on is incident response. And so, again, I've already said this, the most important features are the ones that we've already shipped and that customers are using. And so reliability is the high order bit. What we want here is to minimize incident time. Incidents are at best a degraded experience and at worst a total outage. So I had inherited tier 1 operations team, some tier 2 operations team, and those teams were gold on ticket count, throughput, total cost, and things like that, but they're anti-patterns. They're not gold on or necessarily able with the skills to close the loop on the toil that they were seeing. So my team runs incident and crisis management for a broad set of services at Microsoft, not just Azure. And so what we're doing right now is investing in engineering efforts for us to build really the world-class incident response capabilities within the system. So I am going to skip it because Narayan gave me a little bit of a hello. And I'm going to jump into learning's critical moves. So prepping for this talk was really a great exercise, and looking back in the last year since I started on the team, I could talk at length about a bunch of things, but I'm going to skip through and go pretty fast here. So one of the first things I realized that was critically important is building and protecting that brand. Again, pulling in operational leaders from other parts of the company to co-create this with us. This isn't something that we're just going to assert and throw on the rest of Microsoft. We really need to think about and understand how to apply it to different cultures. That interaction with HR was an unexpected win. The HR business partner I work with, Chris Helf is his name, attached to me on the very first week, and he's been working with me very closely on building a role guide, helping to understand the HR, the back office implications, and there's been some real advantages to that I didn't see. Engaging recruiting was another really important thing. We haven't hired SREs at Microsoft, so recruiting's looking at me kind of, what is this? I'm not sure what these animals are, and so that's been a really important relationship as well. Really what this ends up being is a change management problem. There's a book that I read, and I would highly recommend to you all. It's called Switch, How to Change Things When Change is Hard. And a couple of these concepts you actually see up here, the critical moves, finding the bright spots, and so forth. It's been really helpful. It's not just a technology problem. This is a cultural problem or an engineering problem. It's both. It's not just technology. The other thing is a recognition of change being really disruptive. We're hardwired as humans to really drive for predictability, and it's proven that we have fight or flight mechanisms when change shows up. That can lead to fear and lead to weird behaviors, and it's something to really understand the intensity at which you're driving. As I said earlier, I drove a little bit too quickly and accelerated a little bit too quickly, and it led to some issues. The other thing is inertia is directly proportional to the size of change you're trying to do. The size of change that we're trying to do is enormous, so really scaling back and being smart about how we approach it is important. The next one is meeting teams where they are and not where you want them to be. And so this gets into really the next one, which is grab a shovel but build a backhoe. Happy to jump in, really need to understand and work to jump into the fire lines, if you will, at the same time not accepting that that's the right way to go. We want to eliminate that toil. We want to build better systems that are capable of scaling and using less folks. And then finding the bright spots. There are excellent bright spots in any organization, in any team. And so where are those teams? Who are those folks? Those are your people, the cohorts that you really want to peer up with. So you'll notice here that I didn't talk about how culture is the problem, because I don't think culture is the problem. I think culture is an outcome that happens through incentives, rewards, results, and so forth. Culture is actually the source of your organization's biggest strength. And so leveraging that is critical and not looking at that as the problem, I should say. So how you do it and what you do changes who you are. And this is something that we want to embody as SRE. We're going to preach, but we're going to practice more importantly. So in conclusion, your org and services are alive. The power to drive this change exists within your organization. You got to be patient. It requires a huge amount of energy. It's non-trivial to do. It requires pioneering spirit. And it's an awesome challenge for voracious problem solvers who want to work towards goal state. So we're on a really long journey here at Microsoft. This is not something that we're going to change overnight. It's a multi-year effort. And I actually have way more questions than I do answers. So look forward to talking with many of you and understanding your journeys and what's worked for you and pitfalls and so forth. I don't think that we have time for Q&A. I think I'm over by a couple minutes here. So happy to talk with anybody super interested in hearing what your stories are, and look forward to that. And I'd really like to thank SREcon and USENIX for the opportunity to speak with you all today. Thank you very much.